Okay, well, welcome to our March webinar in the Civic Engagement webinar series. And today we're going to be talking about how we can incorporate service learning into the classroom. And so our objectives today are going to be around exploring the idea of service learning, what it is, what it isn't, understanding why it's important, and then identifying some ways that we can start to incorporate service learning into the school day. And most importantly, sharing resources that are going to include toolkits and templates and all of the sorts of things that teachers need in order to make this seamless transition for incorporating service learning. So I'm so glad that you all could be on this webinar with me today. And it would be great if those of you who are on the call, if you wanted to share anything about your experience with service learning, if this is something that you are skilled in, if it's something that you're just learning about, it might be helpful to hear. Not to put you on the spot.
So I can go first since I already am not muted. So when we're talking about service learning, are we talking about like service projects?
Yeah, so there'll be an important distinction that we'll make here shortly about what service learning is. And service projects certainly could be incorporated if they are blending service with the learning. If they're tied to curricular standards as part of that project, then it certainly could count.
Okay. So I think maybe I think that I have been doing this as I was teaching.
Great.
But since I've been in different school districts, I think it probably went better in some school districts where the administration was engaged in it, and not so well if the administration wasn't sure what, because I've done service projects, but if the administration wasn't sure what we were trying to accomplish, then it was a little bit more hit and miss.
Yeah, that's a really important part of it, I think, is having that administrative buy-in. Thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone else on the call who'd like to share? Okay, well, we'll keep going. And if something comes up, then anyone is welcome to pop in and share and ask questions along the way. So if you were on the last call last month, and you might remember this quote, the Civic Engagement Initiative through the Kansas State Department of Education is sort of built on these 6 proven practices for effective civic learning. And this quote is from that publication, and it just reminds us that in order for students to cultivate a commitment to civic participation and to become active members in their own communities, they have to have these regular opportunities to engage in the civic learning activities all the way along K through 12, pre-K through 12 even. And that students, it's really a falsehood to think that students can just be civically engaged by having learned about it. Students will be civically engaged by having opportunities to be civically engaged in school. And so that's why we're really committed to civic engagement in our schools. And that's why I'm happy to present this to you today. So if you needed a reminder, these are the 6 proven practices for effective civic learning. And right there in number 3, you'll see community and service learning. It was called out as one of the proven practices for effective civic learning is incorporating those opportunities for community engagement and then also service learning. So what is service learning? Service learning is a method of instruction where students are participating in the learning process by identifying community needs and then advancing the goals of their given curriculum. So that hyphen in between service learning is very intentional because it is equal parts engaging in the service to the community, as well as equal parts learning whatever the objectives were for this particular lesson. And we'll talk through this framework that you see to the right here. This is called the IPARD framework, which many of you may be familiar with. It is a method by which students are able to investigate a particular issue and then plan and prepare. So the I, the P. And then the A is around action. The A is actually the delivery of the service project. R is around reflection. So having an opportunity to sort of reflect on what they learned, reflect on the service that they just completed, how it might change their perspective about things, how it might change the way that they move forward. And then lastly, the demonstration. So having an opportunity to share their learning with others, to celebrate the success that they had in the framework, and then the framework can just start right over again. And I'll share some resources that sort of give you a worksheet that you can think through what will go on in each of these 5 processes. So there are 8 service learning standards. These come to us from the National Youth Leadership Council. Much of what I'm sharing today is actually coming to us from the National Youth Leadership Council. They have a publication that we will look at here in a little bit called Getting Started in Service Learning. And it really is sort of a how-to guide of how to get started with service learning. So much so that I found that I was just copy pasting, and at some point in the presentation, I thought, okay, we're going to stop doing this and we're just going to go into the document and take a look around. So these 8 standards are coming to us, and what they've said is that these standards may look different across different projects. They may look different for elementary students as opposed to high school students, as opposed to college students, but that all service learning projects or activities, initiatives, they should contain these 8 standards. So standard number 1 is that there has to be a component of meaningful service, right? So number 1 and number 2 are reiterating that hyphen that we talked about between the service and the learning. And so this this meaningful service really needs to be actively engaging them in sort of a personally relevant, meaningful way. Service learning really should be led by the students. And so what's meaningful to students might be different than what's meaningful to the adults. It also has to have that strong link to the curriculum. This is an instructional strategy. If you took the link to the curriculum out, then we're just doing service, right? We're just doing community service. This is us, cleaning up the campus. It's us doing a cleanup for Earth Day in our community. It's planting a tree on Arbor Day. But if there's no link to the curriculum, then it fails to be a service learning activity. As we saw in that IPARD process, reflection is a really key part of service learning and one of the standards. They really have to give students an opportunity to reflect on themselves, to think about their interaction with their community and their interaction with their peers. Service learning should also include some component of diversity, and it doesn't need to be diversity in the way that we might think about diversity today in terms of diversity of race or ethnicity, but it's more about exploring a diversity of perspectives, exploring not only what I think about a particular situation, but what other people think about a particular situation as well, and then having mutual respect for all of the participants that are engaged. A key component of service learning is also youth voice. It's providing them the opportunity to have voice and choice in the planning of the project, in the implementation of the project, and finally in the evaluation of the project. There really is a partnership. Oh my gosh, that was not intended, but here we go to number 6. There really is a partnership between the youth and the adults in service learning, and even more so between the classroom and the community, because these service learning activities that we typically engage in will be done right in your own communities. These aren't things that you need to go somewhere else outside of your community in order to incorporate these projects. There needs to be an ongoing progress monitoring. So giving our, was trying to move my faces. They're having an ongoing opportunity to sort of assess how it's going with implementation and their progress. And then during the demonstration part of it, they're then able to share those results and talk about how it could be sustained or how it could be improved for the next time. And then lastly is sort of this catch-all with duration and intensity. So it really needs to make sure that the service learning project is long enough and broad enough to specifically address the community needs. If you're doing a really in-depth project and you hope that you might accomplish it in one class period, that's probably not going to be a feasible thing. So we need to think through what the appropriate duration is for a project like this. There are a number of benefits of service learning. We'll start with an increase in engagement in school and learning. When students are able to do a service learning project as part of their classroom experience, then they're really building that relevance of what they're learning and making that connection to the real world, which is also then giving them an increase in engagement because they have control over what they're learning, they have control over the activities that they're engaged in. And so we have found that that does give an increase in their engagement in school. They're also able to practice all of those soft skills that we know are critical to ensuring that our students are graduating ready for success. So by way of the research, by way of investigating and preparing for the project, working in small groups, perhaps engaging those different perspectives, they're going to be practicing a whole host of interpersonal, intrapersonal, and communication skills. They'll also have the application of cross-cultural skills. This one, I just sort of said it's a little bit repetitive, but these are those able to hold multiple perspectives and to think about the diversity of thought. This could also be an opportunity to learn more about things that are going on in their community that they might not have been aware of before. As we hope with all of our service learning projects, it will develop civic engagement habits. When students are able to think critically about things and they start to question, well, why is it this certain way? Is there anything that we could do about it to make it better? They're actually practicing those civic engagement habits that we want them to have later on in life. We want to have a population of people who care deeply about their communities and are willing to take action, to stay informed, and then to think that they really can make a meaningful difference in their community. And lastly, service learning is a great opportunity to have exposure to different career opportunities. So as they are exploring and thinking about their projects that they're implementing, they will have exposure to different things in the community, different adults in the community, different job opportunities that might be in the community, and that might set them down a different path of thinking than they had been in before. So getting to some differences between service learning and service and learning, I came across a couple of these that I thought were really fun. So when we are taking students out and we're planting flowers at the local park, that's service. If we were in a class and we were studying soil erosion, that's learning. If we were in a class where we were researching native grasses and then working with gardeners to control erosion at a local park, that is the blend of service and learning. In service learning, we're really taking students out of those passive roles and we're putting them into a position of active power. Another example is, let's suppose that we had a science class that had students use a microscope to examine water samples that were provided to them. That would be an example of learning in the classroom. What if instead they were able to identify local water sources, gather those samples themselves, look at them under the microscope in the lab, document their results, and then present them as part of a presentation to city government to suggest some action to address pollution that might be present or water quality issues that might be present. And so it doesn't always have to be a huge leap from service to learning. By giving students an opportunity to explore the water themselves, to collect the sample themselves, and then to sort of think through what the recommendations would be for water quality improvement, we're making this into a service learning activity. There was another one that I didn't type out, but it was in the elementary grade. Oftentimes service learning is really easy to think about in the high school or even in the middle school. But at the elementary level, what they had said was the students go to the library and they pick out a book and they read their book, right? So that's learning that might happen. But instead, what if we had our second and third graders create books about their own special family traditions and then took those books and read them to kindergartners? So we are now expanding on just a simple reading project, and we're incorporating art, we're incorporating reading, and then we're also incorporating them serving the kindergarten students by reading aloud to them and having an opportunity to practice their reading. And so there are easy shifts that can be made along the way, but it does typically take a lot of coordination and administrative buy-in, as was mentioned earlier. So when we're getting started in service learning, it's really important just to think small, right? Some of these examples that I've given so far, they might be too big. And so start small. Think about how you might do something within your own school. And especially as it pertains to our elementary students, the school could be the community that they're attempting to serve. I'm certainly not suggesting that we get hundreds of kindergarten students out there to collect water samples from local creek beds, because that has danger written all over it. And so for our young students, particularly at the elementary levels, it might be about what we can bring into the school for them or how they might improve their school community. We can keep it manageable, we can keep it without being overwhelming. So right now, I'm going to exit the PowerPoint and show you a number of resources that I think are really effective. And I'm going to start with that National Youth Leadership Center document that I was talking about before. Can everyone still see? Thumbs up? Okay, great. Just making sure my toggling is working. So this is the document that I was mentioning before. With the getting started in service learning, you can see that this very small document is 69 pages long. So trust me when I say that it is very comprehensive. And we will be sure that we share this link on our website as well as a resource that you can find easily. So prior to this, we've sort of have been moving along the getting started in service learning document in my presentation already. And now we're at the point of what does it look like to actually implement a service learning project? And so the National Youth Leadership Center has said that there are really 4 stages that you want to think about with regards to your service learning project. So we're thinking about first, what are the outcomes that we want to improve on, right? So what is it that we're looking for students to either learn as it pertains to an academic standard, or maybe there are some of those social, emotional, or career readiness, technical employability skills that we want our students to achieve as a result of this project. And certainly there would be that connection to the curriculum. In stage 2, then, we think creatively about what acceptable evidence of that learning might look like. Because the way that we currently assess learning is typically through, there might be quizzes, there might be a test, students might need to write a report about something, they might demonstrate their learning through a presentation. And so this is having us think through, how will we know that the student learned what we want them to learn through this non-traditional sort of project process? And so there could be some of those same things that we had before, but there might be a journal that the students keep that might be journaling their learning. There could be presentations that they're making to the community as opposed to the school. And so you can get a little bit creative in thinking through stage 2 and what acceptable evidence might look like. And in this document on down from this page, it does give you an opportunity to think through that and offers a lot of, generates a number of ideas. In stage 3 is really when you are implementing the project and you're using that IPARD process that we talked about before. What I think is really interesting is in this diagram, if you look down at the IPARD little circle that they have down here, you'll notice that the action part of it is not an equal third. They have not split this into equal thirds, and that's because a real premium is put on the planning and implementation, or investigation and planning that goes into it, and then the reflection and demonstration afterwards. The action is important, but not so much important as the process by which we got there and what we learned from it afterwards. And so I thought that was a really unique thing that I wanted to share with you all as well. And then the last stage is around stage 4. So sort of the teacher thinking through this self-assessment. How did it go? What worked? What didn't work? What adjustments need to be made? Were the learning outcomes realized? Did students learn what we had hoped that they learned? And then they'll be ready to hopefully implement another service learning project in the future. So when we scroll on down in this document, I'm sorry if it makes you nauseous when I'm moving through it. They have here a map that educators can use to sort of thinking through those 4 stages that we just talked about. And they included a little pre-stage here, which is about how you get students excited about doing this process. And they have offered you a couple of videos that might be exciting and sort of build the hype around the project. But this really is a how-to guide that an educator could then use as you're thinking through all of these sorts of stages and questions, which is why it felt duplicative to continue to put this information into my presentation. So we're using this document because ultimately this is where I would like to drive all of our educators to go when they're thinking about service learning projects. So then they'll be able to think through all of the different stages for the investigation, the planning, the action, the reflection, the demonstration, and then of course, stage 4 with the self-assessment. So I thought that tool was really handy. And then it goes into further in each of the chapters, more information about the stages. And so it can think through what the standards might be as you're in stage 1 and you're connecting it to all of the various skills that are available. And it does then, of course, replicate this as you move into stage 2. And here's where they start to offer some of those creative ways of thinking about demonstrating that the student learned what we want them to learn. So they have here a leadership survey, which might be a really unique way to think about the skills that students might have learned. And you can see them off here to the side. Sorry, I went too fast. Around self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, relationship, decision-making. And so a pre and a post assessment might be able to assess the skills that a student learned during that time. They also have here a number of other things. You might have a portfolio. There might be a graphic organizer. Maybe you'll do a learning log. Different things like this are sort of fun to think about what that could look like. And then they move right into the IPARD process here. And what is also really fun about this document, in addition to all of the pictures, is that they give you service learning in action. So very often throughout here are these stories about what service learning looks like in other communities. And I think that's a really fun way to sort of generate the ideas that we might be looking to implement. They go so far then as to give you worksheets that you can use. So as you're in the investigation part, here's an activity that you might do with the steps and all of the things that might happen as a result of that. They generate some ideas for using global frameworks to sort of spark interest in students if they're not sure what it is that they might want to address in their service learning project. There are a number of goals that are coming to us. They're offering ideas when you're sort of in this investigation stage that you might do a community walkabout, that you might, there was another thing I'd read about community mapping, where students are drawing maps of the services that are available. And through that, students were able to identify where there might be a recreational desert or a food desert or a healthcare desert or an access issue within their community. And I thought that was a really interesting way of sort of investigating the issue that's happening in the community. They were waiting for the data to tell them the issue that they should care about instead of coming into it from the other direction. There could be a community survey. And on and so forth. So I will make sure that this document is linked for us in the when we post our materials from this session, because I think that going through this document from the perspective of an educator would be really useful. This was one of my favorite documents that I found. But while I'm here, sort of out of the presentation, I also want to show you some other resources that I found that I thought were could be really useful to our educators. So the first is here. Many of you may not know that KU has a rather robust Center for Service Learning. And this Center for Service Learning is obviously a little bit more geared towards the post-secondary. They're offering a number of classes that are service learning classes. But I think that the information that they're sharing, the project ideas that they have could still be applicable to us in the earlier grades. So it's just csl.ku.edu. So CSL being the Center for Service Learning.ku.edu. And on down here, they have a service. You can talk about service learning, or if you want to be even expanding and thinking broader about civic engagement in particular, you could go to the civic engagement path. But we're going to click on service learning so that I can show you that they have a number of different learning resources that are available. Again, many of these other elements might be particular to the students who are at KU, but in the learning resources, I know in particular that there could be applicability, especially at the high school level, for some project ideas around service learning. Additionally, I found that the National Geographic has an entire service learning toolkit that's also very useful and helpful. And in fact, it's modeled in sort of the same way as the National Youth Leadership Center's toolkit, in that it contains actual tangible worksheets and such that you could use, just print and use right directly in your class. What's also really interesting about this one is that it's sort of a little tricky. It tells you that it's a toolkit, and then it will show you the Service Learning Educator Guide. But if you go down here, you see that there are 3 other PDFs. One of these PDFs is the Service Learning Family Guide. And so that's really fun to think about how we can incorporate family engagement into this. The third one is the Community Guide. So thinking about how service learning could be a way to increase community participation in schools. And lastly, my favorite one is the Youth Student Workbook. And so this is a document that is available to teachers at no cost, and it contains a service learning workbook. So we could print this and have sort of a ready-made tool to help us think about. And if you look here, you'll see that these things are lining up with the IPARD process that the National Youth Leadership Council is promoting. So we're investigating, we're planning and preparing, generating some possible ideas. Here's the planning part of it. And then we take action. At some point, yes, we complete our project and we take action. And we have opportunities to sort of think about these reflections. So describing what you learned, reflect about what you're most proud of, describe someone who could have been helped. And so I found the National Geographic tool to be really handy and useful, thinking about it. Even though it says grades 5 through 12 and it has some subjects here, I think the applicability can extend beyond that, because if nothing else, it can generate ideas of how we might approach this in the earlier grades. The other really fun thing about this web page is if you continue to scroll to the bottom and don't pay attention to these PDFs, scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, you'll see that they have some idea sets. So they have generated for you already a number of ideas where you can be engaged in environmental learning in the field, so outside of the school walls, or even in the school. And I thought that one was really interesting. As I was looking through some of these ideas, here's one that I never would have thought about. So instead of, maybe we're in the weather unit and students are learning, what is a tornado? What is a hurricane? What is other things? I don't know why my brain just blinked out on all natural disasters, tsunami. So they could, in addition to learning about these different types of natural disasters, start to think about what could potentially affect our community and discuss how they might prepare for that. And maybe they actually create something for the community. Maybe it's a tip sheet or a fact sheet, or they're just, working with the community, with the city council. Maybe as part of the utility bill, they want to mail out something so that individuals know to be prepared for natural disasters. Maybe they're doing a kit on fire safety and they decide that they want to raise money to give away fire detectors, smoke detectors, that's the word, to families in the community who might not otherwise have one. So there are a lot of things, and it goes on. It has a number of different projects and ideas that students could explore within the school. And then at the bottom, it gives you an opportunity to then sort of toggle back over and look at the ones that they might do out in the community as well. The last website I wanted to be sure to share with you is the National Youth Leadership Council. So if you were on this webpage under resources, under service learning defined, there is that getting started in service learning document that I was referencing earlier. But then there is also, they have all of the quality service learning standards, also has its own document. There are a number of teaching and learning tools, different things here, profiles that you could look at to see what other individuals are doing. And they actually offer, the National Youth Leadership Council offers an annual conference, and it will be in April this year in Tennessee. And so that's always a really fun opportunity to learn from them as well. So there are a number of great resources here. You can see right down here on this page. I think I'm on the teaching and learning tools page. So I had gone to resources and then teaching and learning tools. There's a self-assessment to think about how you're having equity in service learning. There's that getting started in service learning, different handbooks. So again, they're giving you a number of ideas here for after-school programs and how you might incorporate service learning projects into after-school programs. But we can take that information and apply it to what we might be doing during the school day as well. So back to the presentation, there are some others here. There is the learning standards, that's the National Youth Leadership Center, the National Geographic Toolkit. Here's a youth facilitator guide for service learning, the KU Center that we mentioned as well. And so these are some of the resources that I was able to find when I was looking at having a better understanding of service learning and what it may or may not look like as part of our school day. So I'm going to move to talk a little bit about the webinar that's coming up next and to talk about a mini grant opportunity that we have as well. But I did want to pause just to see if there are questions, insights that you've had, things that you've been thinking about.
Jessica.
Yeah.
So this is cool. It is very much like the format of engineering by design, project-based learning,
Mm-hmm.
problem-based learning, those type of things. And the difficulty with those in the school, as much as I tried them and did them and wanted to do, is that given out a 45-minute time that I have with the kids per day, and the lack of being able to, like go out into the community to do things, even if it is local, what are some things that, or maybe do you already know of some things that are in place that kind of speak to that? Because if I had 2 hours a day with the same group of kids, I could do that, really easy. And I would love to do that. Or if I had, if the principal were to say, you have this time every week to do service learning. And if you need the buses, to go out into the community, you could do that. But that's not the reality of how it actually is. And so it makes it very difficult to accomplish these wonderful things. These are absolutely wonderful things. And so do you already have something in place or in the works that kind of helps with those kind of unfortunate reality things that are going on?
You bring up really great points. And I would be happy to put in some time and energy to see if something like that exists to sort of address those challenges that we're bound to run up against. I think yes. I think even in a small town like mine, I don't think that the students are getting out of the school building very often at all. No. One small suggestion, super small suggestion, is that this could be looked at from a co-curricular perspective, which then might allow two teachers to partner together, so that you would double the time in a day that you might have had otherwise. So if you partnered with the PE teacher, perhaps you're doing a wellness campaign, or you're partnered with the art teacher because they're making those books that they're going to read to the kindergartners, or maybe it's a music thing because they're learning. I don't know, I have to come back to that one.
Right.
I could generate something, but maybe not on the fly. Maybe there would be an opportunity then to sort of double down in the day, like the amount of time in 2 class periods. But
that's a great idea.
I do see your point that it could be really challenging. And you didn't even speak to the biggest challenge, which I just think is just a general lack of time and planning to even generate an activity like this.
Yeah, that is a challenge.
I do think that we have some school districts in the state, and not to let the cat out of the bag, but next month, our special guest speaker, it won't be me. I know you're so sad to not hear my voice 2 months in a row. It's going to be South Lyon County, which is currently the only Gold Star winner for civic engagement in the state of Kansas, with all 4 of their schools being Gold Star Civic Advocacy Network Award winners. And so that'll be a really great opportunity. I hope you join us for that one to talk to them about the types of service learning projects that they're implementing. But what I will tell you is that they have fundamentally sort of shifted how they think about civic engagement. It's not a nice to have anymore. It is the cornerstone of what they're doing in their school district. Everything drives from the civic engagement of their young people. And I think that when we have that kind of administrative buy-in, then we're able to work through some of these other hurdles much easier. So next step is we need to get this information out to more administrators.
Very good. I have a part 2 to that question.
Yeah, love it.
So that's the teacher part, but then from the non-traditional educator, the community part, then do you have something that that can be given to them that says, hey, we have this, our schools are going to be doing service learning, and here's how you could participate in this, or look at these ideas and see where you could fit into there, because maybe the teacher can't provide everything, but here you can provide this part. You know, you could come into the school and do this part. You know, do you have something that's like that?
I think the National Geographic Community Engagement Guide does start to get to some of that information, how to have that community buy-in. But that's certainly another thing that we could look at creating. I think that if the State Department of Education had its own sort of toolkit for service learning that addressed some of these things that you're talking about, that could be a really interesting project to work on.
Yes, especially if it was geared towards Kansas, you know, like Kansas, what we have to teach and what we have to do, you know, because it's all wonderful when we can have things like that, but if we're basing on California standards or California, you know, it doesn't work out so well.
Okay, that's a really great idea.
Okay,
I'll see what we can do to start working on something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Others on the call who have questions or insights that might be helpful to the group? Okay, well, just as a reminder, we are part of the Kansas Volunteer Commission, and the Kansas Volunteer Commission is a program of the State Department of Education, and our vision really is to empower all Kansans to meet community needs through service. So we provide training, we provide technical assistance and resources really to address AmeriCorps National Service, youth mentoring, youth civic engagement, and volunteerism. And so we're really excited to be able to be in this space with you today. As a reminder, the civic engagement webinar that I'm hosting is the third Friday of every month. So I think that third Friday is going to be April 21st. And as I mentioned, we are going to be joined by USD 252 South Lyon County, and they'll be sharing some of the best practices from their school district. Additionally, Tierney Kurtdahl is joining us on the call today. She is our mentoring coordinator, and she hosts a mentoring webinar series that's the first Thursday of every month. And then we also have a volunteer engagement webinar series that's working through the 12 elements of effective volunteer management, and that's on the second Tuesday of every month. Additionally, we are gearing up to release my favorite of all of our mini grants. Not to be biased, but the Youth Civic Engagement Mini Grant is going to be releasing on Monday, March the 27th. And this mini grant will offer up to $5,000 per application for youth-led and youth-initiated civic engagement projects, or to fund the professional development or training so that educators better understand what youth civic engagement is and why it is important. And so we're really excited for this. It's always our biggest mini grant of the year. We have over $50,000 earmarked for this mini grant series. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have a number of high quality applications. Every school district in the state is welcome to apply. Local communities can apply. Youth serving organizations can apply. Pretty much all of our mini grants are available to anything other than a for-profit entity. So be sure that you are staying connected with us. You can visit us on our website, and right from there, you can also sign up to receive our monthly newsletter, which is where we release all of our mini grant announcements. Or you can also follow us on social media. If you look for the Kansas Volunteer Commission on Twitter, on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, and then of course, Facebook. And with that, then I would say that that is the information that I wanted to share with you today about service learning. I do appreciate your questions and the request for Kansas specific materials. And I'll just pause to see if there is any other questions or information. Any questions maybe about the Youth Civic Engagement Mini Grant? I hope everyone on the call will consider that. Okay, well, that awkward pause seemed long enough. I hope that you all have a really great weekend. I think for most of us, we're finishing up spring break. Oh, and happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm wearing my green today. I see Tierney is as well. Mostly, I just don't want my kids to pinch me because Leprechaun Day is a really big deal in my house. And I was tired of getting pinched when I was in my pajamas. So, all right, everyone, have a great weekend. Thank you so much for your time and energy today.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. See you next month.
All righty. Bye.
Bye.